This build has everything. Maximum invisibility time, huge damage resist, huge burst DPS, and enemy suppression. Today guys, I'm going to cover absolutely every little thing from mods to glaive perks to exotic pairings and even glaive tips and tricks so that you can fulfill the hunter ninja fantasy that you've wanted since the inception of Destiny. This video is going to cover a lot of aspects, so if you already know some of these things, then please check out the timestamps below to skip to the part that you need. So when I first got the glaive, it felt puny and gimmicky. Sure, it was fun, but how was a melee weapon going to function in endgame PvE content? Once I started to unlock the artifact and play around with Void 3.0 more and more, I realized that this weapon could be ridiculous once you spec into it deep enough. Let's start off with the most important aspect of this build, suppressing glaive. Suppressing glaive is unlocked from the 4th column in the artifact mod. Both the melee and the ranged attack for the glaive, once you equip this mod, suppresses enemies and causes them to have a similar disorientation to when you blind them using a blinding grenade launcher. Without suppressing glaive, this build falls apart, as enemies you are dancing with point blank can hit you back, but with this mod, they'll bumble around aimlessly while you stab their health away. Now before we cover the rest of the mods, let's go to the Void 3.0 setup we are going to be using, as then the build will make a lot more sense. First of all, in terms of the grenade, it's got to be Vortex Grenade. The damage output and the new sucky version of this grenade is ridiculous at clearing waves of adds. The grenade is also really good for damaging and weakening champions ready for your power weapon, which we'll discuss later on. Next, in terms of aspects, you want to run Stylish Executioner, which once enemies are weakened, suppressed or volatile, defeating them grants invisibility and true sight. This pairs perfectly well with suppressing glaive, as each time you hit an enemy with your glaive, whether it's with the melee or the ranged, they will be debuffed, and then Stylish Execution will proc. For the second aspect, we need a reliable way of going invisible, especially for those oh shit moments where it's too risky to carry on going gung-ho with your glaive. Here I recommend running Vanishing Step rather than Trapper's Ambush, because I find it much easier to dodge while using a glaive rather than to switch weapons and throw the smoke or to jump up and use the Void Dive ability. Both of these aspects also provide 2 fragments each, so we can run the maximum of 4 fragments. Speaking of fragments, Echo of Leeching is key, as the glaive melee does work with this and it triggers health regeneration. Echo of Persistence does work as well to extend the invisibility timer, unlike Graviton Forfeit, which is currently bugged at the time of making this video. Finally, our last 2 fragments revolve around our grenade, which is Echo Exchange, whereby melee final blows grant grenade energy, and Echo of Undermining, whereby void grenades weaken enemies. The grenade is super useful at weakening and debuffing stronger enemies so that your heavy weapon in this build can one-shot them. More on this later on. The super of choice for me is Mobius Quiver, as it provides both great burst DPS and great ad control. After killing an enemy with Mobius, you will also proc Stylish Executioner. Next, let's move on to exotic armor pairings for this build. There are quite a few exotics that synergize well with Void 3.0, but I think one stands out above the others. As I said before, at the time of this video, Graviton is currently bugged and it does not extend your invisibility timer. So our exotic of choice here is the Omnioculus, as it provides massive damage resistance while invisible. Often the moment you go invisible, enemy attacks, especially AoE attacks, are still tracking you from the second before, and if you go invisible at low health, you often still end up dying. The damage resist from Omnioculus helps to prevent that, and then you have ample time to reposition and take a breather. Our exotic weapon of choice is going to be the new Parasite Grenade Launcher, because it provides huge burst DPS, which is easily attainable with this build. This glaive build lets you kill tons of adds without even taking a scratch. For each add that you kill, you build stacks of Worm's Hunger, which increases the damage caused by the grenade launcher. What I ended up doing was to clear multiple enemies around a champion and then to fire my Parasite shot to obliterate the stronger enemies. You can then use Marksman's Dodge with Vanishing Step to gain a second shot of the grenade launcher and fire again for a quick 2-shot burst combo. The other option here is also your trusty Galahorn, and it can provide a bit more range to a heavy DPS option if you require it for that specific activity. The Parasite Launcher, although it's amazing for burst DPS, isn't great for anything over short to medium term range. Now let's get back to the mods. So our first important mod is going to be Well of Tenacity, which has now been buffed from a measly 10% damage resist to 50% damage resist while picking up Void Elemental Wells. Usually this only lasts for 5 seconds after you pick up the elemental well, so I often pair this with elemental time dilation, which increases the time the buff lasts for. It goes up from 5 seconds to 8 seconds with 1 stack of elemental time dilation. Next, Reaping Well Maker pairs up really well with Vanishing Step and lets you spawn a Void Elemental Well when using your dodge and killing your next enemy. The other way we can spawn Elemental Wells is through Elemental Ordnance, whereby grenade kills spawn an Elemental Well that matches your subclass type, so in this case Void. Finally, to maximize our Parasite Launcher, I use Grenade Launcher Holster, which actually works with this exotic. It auto-loads your grenade launcher every 4 seconds when it's stowed away. Honestly, you end up never having to reload the thing. And then for the cherry on top, to make sure you never run out of ammo, make sure you stack on Grenade Launcher Ammo Finder. The other mods remaining that I use are Glaive Scavenger, self-explanatory, to have more glaive ammo, Font of Might to increase glaive DPS, Elemental Time Dilation also works with Font of Might, and it increases the duration from 10 seconds to 13 seconds, and Font of Might this season is an artifact mod and it only costs 1 energy. Depending on your activity, make sure to have arc/solar or void damage resist, and then also pair it with a concussive or sniper damage resist. And then if you want to solo endgame PvE content, I'd recommend running Unstoppable Glaive. It lets you stun unstoppable champions even with the ranged attack. I often end up doing this while invisible, and it's a really foolproof way of dealing with those unstoppable champions. Then I run either Anti-Barrier Scout or Overload Auto Rifle or SMG to finish off the build, as most activities have 2 types of champions. The final mod I haven't touched on is Energy Vampirism, which is unlocked in the final column of your artifact, which is going to help to get your grenade back every time you suppress a target, which, surprise surprise, is a whole lot with this build. I'd recommend sticking it on your class item, especially if you have Artifice Armour. I really wish I stacked some more bounties, as I'm still yet to unlock that final column, but if you have it, definitely put it on. There are other great mods this season, such as Volatile Flow. Volatile Flow is an amazing perk, but it's not absolutely necessary for this build. Your enemies are already going to be suppressed. If you just want a little bit more add AoE explosions, then be my guest and add this to the build. It's going to work great. In terms of stat priority, 100 mobility here to maximize dodge uptime and therefore invisibility uptime. And then in second place, it's probably a tie between 100 discipline and 100 recovery, depending on your personal preference or how difficult the activity you're running is going to be. If you have any stats left on your armor, finally top it off with some intellect, and then resilience and strength are sort of low down for this build. We don't really tend to use the smoke bomb much. Because of the stat penalties on a lot of the Void 3.0 fragments, optimizing your stats here will be difficult, so don't be too disheartened by this. I had a fairly awful stat distribution, but even then this build was great. Let's move on to the glaive itself and what glaive perks you should be running. Big disclaimer here, guys. At the time of making this video, a lot of the glaive perks do not work with the melee attack, so I'm going to personally recommend perks for primarily the ranged attack and the reload speed of the weapon. If and when they fix these interactions, please take my recommendations here with a pinch of salt. To start off, you want ballistic tuning for increased range and less damage drop off for the projectile. I personally run Alloy Magazine for increased reload speed when the magazine is empty. Trust me, the glaive reloads so damn slowly. Then for the perks, I recommend Enhanced Impulse Amplifier, which massively increases reload speed and the projectile velocity. And then for the final column, Enhanced Frenzy, whereby being in combat, which is practically all the time with this build, it increases the damage for specifically your ranged attack at the moment, but it also increases handling and reload for the weapon. Here are some awesome tips and tricks for the glaive that most people don't know about. You can actually maximize DPS by blocking continuously and then repeatedly spamming the light attack, rather than going through the motions of the 3 combo move with the glaive. Just prodding repeatedly like this actually increases the glaive's DPS. Have a look at the power bar of your glaive, that U-shaped thing that, you ignore. That is your block energy, and it determines how long you can block for. Did you know, while blocking, you can continue to use the ranged attack, which is very helpful. Now, this final tip takes this build to a whole new level. While invisible, spamming the light attack on a glaive, if you start immediately after going invisible, does not break invisibility. That's right, guys. Even with a crazy build like this little tip takes it to the next level. So there you have it, guys, the complete guide to creating the most kick-ass build for glaives. Honestly, guys, you have to try it. It's absolutely insane, and I love this unique playstyle. If you've made it this far, make sure to help the algorithm and spread the love by liking the video, commenting down below, and if you want to make sure you don't miss out on more awesome Destiny content, make sure to subscribe to the channel. That's all for today, guys. Peace out.